panel. Thank you.
Thank you so much. 2 minutes. Naibu wa Raisi, tunawakaribisha sana, and your powerful delegation. You're most welcome. Honorable ministers from Kenya, honorable ministers from Uganda, representative of UNDP, powerful members of our economy, members of the private sector, African strategic leadership, thank you very much for the breakfast. Our protocol observed. We all know about the benefits of integration, and it's not dwell into that. We all subscribe to ESC, COMESA, tripartite, and African continental free trade area, and we are aware of the benefits. But I'd like to give proposals on how we can improve on this integration. Number one, of course, we have to reduce on the NTBs. We have to trade in similar, we have a problem of trading in similar primary commodities. We should have comparative advantage in the trading or producing of our primary commodities. Of course, political instability is a problem, but we could work together to solve these problems instead of leaving these problems to the a particular country, because it affects all of us, just like you said, Your Excellency, last night. Awareness. We all know very well that there are some members of the private sector who are not aware of the ESC protocol, of COMESA, of TFTA, and African Continental Free Trade Area. What do we do about it? Let us sensitize. Let us sensitize the youth. Let us sensitize the masses using all the medium, social media, electronic, print, so that our people get to know about this integration and how they can benefit in it. Structural bottlenecks. Let us strengthen the Northern Corridor. We have the powerful Northern Corridor, but some of the members are not on board yet. Let us find a way of bringing them on board so that we operate as a region. Flexibility in trade and services. We talk about trade in commodities, but what about trade in services? Can I go and do business in Kenya? Can I go and do business start a business in Rwanda? Can the youth come and work here? We have Kenyans working here, even in this particular hotel, but can a Ugandan go to Burundi or Rwanda or South Sudan and work there? We need to address that. Trade in services should also be promoted because it covers a very big percentage in our economies. For example, like Uganda, it's about 56%. I'd like to conclude by stating that we need to leverage the demographic dividend, of which majority are youth, to harness human capital. We need to focus on them so that we are able to create opportunities and sustainable development. Let us attract FDIs in strategic sectors such as infrastructure development so that we improve on connectivity within the region. Tunashukuru sana. I want to thank you very much. And I'd like to state, Johnny Walker yesterday was talking about walking. No, the time is for jogging and running. Let us stop walking. We've been walking for all these years. Let us now run like the antelope and the lion. They run from each other. Let us run to ensure that we emancipate East Africa, we emancipate Africa. Asante sana. I've been given these very big shoes to invite the Deputy President. I'm humbled. Your Excellency, please come and address your people. So you're most welcome. Asante sana. Thank you.
I'm sorry, it's not yet time to sit. I want to request you to stand for a minute in deference and respect to a great African and an international citizen, Kofi Annan. Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, ladies and gentlemen, again, good morning, and I'm happy to be in this great city of Kampala. And to attend this important discussion this morning, hosted by the Africa Strategic Leadership Center. As has been said very ably by the Minister, Uganda and Kenya enjoy very special relationship, historic, trade, political, and in many other spheres. We have many Kenyans who have gone to school in this country. In the past, we have many Kenyans today who go to school in Uganda. We are both members of EAC. We are the pioneers on the Northern Corridor Coalition of the Willing. We are members of EPAS. We negotiated on the same side. We are members of COMESA. And as has been said, both Kenya and Uganda signed the tripartite free trade area at the same time, and we are two of the three countries that have already ratified the tripartite free trade area. We are among the first 22 countries that signed into the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. And so there is tremendous progress in the relations between Uganda and Kenya, whether you're talking about matters people to people, business to business, government to government. We are all weaved up into one. And because of that relationship, we have seen that relationship expand in many areas. And we have seen the strategic leadership of both Kenya and Uganda in driving the integration of not just East Africa, but our continent. When we moved into the EAC in 1999 to replace what was there before, it was a huge leap of faith, because having experienced what happened with the initial East African community, and the decision that was made not to go through preferential free trade area or even free trade area itself, but we went straight into a customs union, which was a huge step. And because of that huge step, so much has happened in the last 10 years. For example, in the last 10 years, business between Uganda and Kenya has doubled from about 48 billion Kenya shillings in 2008. Today, we are at 104 billion Kenya shillings, or just under $1 billion, trade between these two countries. So in the last 10 years, because of the strategic decision we made as members of the East African community, we have seen trade grow phenomenally. I'm told the numbers, especially for this year. And before I go to this year, What has happened in that period is, of course, Kenya became a leading investor in Uganda, among the leading investors in Uganda. Uganda became our leading export destination. And Kenya also became a leading destination for exports from Uganda, showing that by and large, we enjoy very positive progress on either side. And I'm told that the last 4 months of this year, actually Uganda has overtaken Kenya in exports. Now there are more exports from Uganda to Kenya than there are from Kenya to Uganda. Again, demonstrating that indeed the decision to do business together is mutually beneficial. And that is the reason why we must continue on this trajectory, because indeed this is the direction that is going to benefit business and people and government in Uganda as it does for business, people, and government in Kenya. And because of that reason, the horizon, and it's good when we are speaking to business people because they understand numbers. What has happened is that because of these people to people, business to business, government to government working together, especially between Kenya and Uganda, we have fired the EAC. Today, the EAC, intra-trade between the EAC countries, is at around 18%. The average for intra-Africa trade is between 10 and 12%, making EAC the single regional economic bloc in the southern hemisphere that is most progressive. That is something we must be very proud of ourselves, ladies and gentlemen. We must really be very proud that the EAC, with all our challenges, with all the border manenos, with all the other issues, we have still made very huge progress. And when I say that, I'm not saying that so that we can relax, because the competition is inter-European trade, which is at 60%, or intra-Asian trade, which is at 40%. So we have quite some ground to cover. But the good news is that we are making progress. But the challenge is we must up our game. Progressively, consistently, and this engagement in a forum like this between policymakers like myself and business people like yourselves is a conversation that must be continuous, that must be promoted, and that must be robust, so that we can make that progress even faster. I say so because any serious entrepreneur, any serious business person knows that business in the 21st century is built not on margins, but on volumes. Any serious business person must understand that. And if you do not understand that as a business person, then you need to look for something else to do. Right? And where are the volumes? The volumes is in the numbers. When we talk about EAC, we are looking at 6 countries, 170 million people, a GDP of about $165 billion. Right? When we look at the tripartite TFTA, we're looking at 27 countries, about 625 million people, and a GDP of about $1.3 trillion. When we expand to the bigger Africa continental free trade area, we're looking at 1.2 billion people. We're looking at a GDP of $2.5 trillion, and we are looking at 49 countries already signed in out of 55. So every business person and entrepreneur must be pushing where the numbers are. We need to be pushing to EAC, to TFTA, and eventually to the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. That is where we must go. And there is an even much more potent reason why we must push in that direction. Those of you who follow international current affairs, there is a wave of protectionism that we can all see, and that what used to be common is no longer common. You can see there is a movement. I don't want to name places. We all know what's going on. And the more reason why we, as the people of this continent, must look at the blocks that will give us the muscle to negotiate and to have our share of trade. And therefore, as we sit here this morning, and as a Kenyan and an East African policymaker, we know that business, commerce, must drive our relations and our politics going forward. And a very profound statement was made by my brother Daktari when he said, nationalism without Pan-Africanism is meaningless. And I dare say it is actually useless. Because we are living in a world where we have very serious challenges about youth unemployment. We are facing issues that come with youth unemployment, of recruitment into terrorist groups. We have poverty to deal with. And all this must be taken head on by ensuring that we create opportunity for our population, for jobs, for incomes, to reduce poverty, and it can only be driven by opportunities created by business and commerce. And we cannot get it right any other way. That is why in Kenya, we are investing heavily in infrastructure. We are investing heavily in energy. We are investing heavily in relevant education, not just education, relevant education. Education that is going to equip our young men and women with skills and competencies to help them contribute in driving our industry, our value addition, our agro-processing, our manufacturing, because that is where value is added, that is where wealth is created, and that is where opportunity is expanded for young people. And as we invest in infrastructure, we are also focused on ensuring that that infrastructure is transboundary. It is not just infrastructure for Kenya. It is not just infrastructure for Uganda. And that is why later today, with President Museveni, we will be launching a road that will connect Kenya and Uganda in our northern part. Again, because we realize that a road is good for Uganda. It is better if it joins Uganda to Kenya. And that is the direction we should all be focused on. So what am I saying this morning? I am saying this morning that we have made progress. We have tried as much as possible as Kenya to make sure that the port is facilitative. We've tried to eliminate the barriers that have consistently been on the way to business people in Uganda as they are to business people in Kenya. And we continue to listen. And that is why we have the Northern Corridor program that brings our leaders, policymakers together every 3 months. It was 2 months. I think we have now shifted to, the last time we were in Nairobi, I think we said 4 months, every 4 months, because we have finalized most of the teething problems. And that is to address issues of concern by our investors, by our business people, so that we can create that room for business to thrive, jobs to be created, wealth to be created, so that we can manage poverty and we can manage youth unemployment. But you know, we must always look on the other side. What is the flip side? The flip side is that for the challenges that we have, the silver lining is that we can turn them around to opportunities. The youth of our continent will be a problem, but they can become the huge part of our solution depending on where we stand and what we do. And if we do the right things, we will harness the talent, the energy, the expertise, the knowledge of the young people of this continent, if we do the right things. Of course, if we don't, they will then become a big problem to us, governments, communities, and countries. So I do not wish to say many things. I will want to listen to you, because this is supposed to be a conversation, or that's what I was told. So I want to listen to you. I want you to tell me where you think we can do better. Try and find a place to congratulate us for what we have done. I know it's difficult normally for business to find a place to say thank you for doing this. They always ask for more. You know, and with business people, the goalpost is ever moving. But I hope you will find a place to allow us to score. But having said that, I am open to any questions or whatever it is that, yes, thank you. Thank you very much.
Your Excellency, please take a seat. At the front, the questions are coming. I've already seen a hand up. But as you take your seat, Your Excellency, allow me to recognize the following people that are here with you. In a very special way, let's welcome Honorable Aden Mohammed, is the Cabinet Secretary for East African Community and Regional Development in Kenya. But also allow me to recognize the following governors, and these are friends of Uganda, and they've been here very often, Your Excellency. Governor Nanok of Turkana, please do. Governor Ojemong of Busia, Karibu. And Governor Professor Lonyang Po of West Pokot. I have a problem with the position of the microphone, so I will probably ask for a mobile microphone to make it a little easier. Your Excellency, first of all, we want to appreciate you and thank you so much for joining us this morning for this distinguished conversation. You spoke to most of the questions that we really had prepared for you, and so it will make this a little bit difficult, but probably allow, sorry, Your Excellency, but probably allow for the others to be able to ask as many questions as possible. But let's begin with an area of interest for both of us, which is regional trade. And you spoke to the fact that, we've addressed some of the teething bottlenecks between our countries as the East African community, but also doing trade with the rest of the continent. However, we're very mindful that in terms of policy, the right things have been done, but we're still struggling with the operational issues where we probably do not have a trickle down of that information from policy to implementation with our people in areas of engagement. So whether it's at the borders, or whether it's at the ports, or whether it's even at the different immigration offices. How much can be done to be able to translate the conversation at the policy level to implementation, Your Excellency?
Well, this must be a continuous engagement. We must keep working at getting the information where it is. I can maybe link it to advertising. When I was born, I was hearing Omo washes. I still hear the same Omo being advertised today, 50 years later. So people have to be reminded, always. So we must never get tired, and we must never miss any opportunity to provide information, because it's the only way we can get things trickle down. And I appreciate that there are officials, out of ignorance sometimes, deliberate in other times, who want to frustrate some of the interventions that are being made to facilitate trade this way or that way. And that is why we have, for example, the one border post agenda that has been legislated by the East African Legislative Assembly, that will help us bring together all the officials into one understanding and a common procedure and a common understanding, so that the same application on this side and on the other side, we put the borders together. And the intention should be, the borders should be facilitative, should be bridges, not barriers. And I think there is tremendous progress in ensuring that that has happened. But information must be a continuous engagement. And that's why I like it when we have this kind of a conversation, because everybody, we create more understanding every time we engage. And the private sector must not lose faith. The private sector must continuously insist and must continuously knock until every door is opened. And when we commit ourselves as policymakers to the private sector must hold us to account. You cannot just walk away. And the private sector must also realize that they have a stake. It's not the money they make only, it is the progress of our region that is at stake. And therefore, why we make it easy and we facilitate engagement is because we want their input, we want their concerns, we want their contribution in facilitating the progress of our continent. As policymakers, we will be happy when business thrives. We can collect more money, we can build more roads, we can do more things. They too can employ more people, remove a lot of pressure from policymakers, and we can all have a safe home to be. So what I could say is, yes, there could be information gaps. Yes, there could be areas where What we have agreed is frustrated one way or another, but we must not lose faith. We must be consistent, and that is why we as policymakers have dedicated time in the Northern Corridor agenda, in all the others, to make sure that we are available to eliminate the barriers either as they arise or to create greater understanding so that people can take advantage of the agreements that have been done.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Let's move to a conversation around regional integration. Many say that you have these discussions at the top, and they're very excellent. And so you have, however, when you return to your different countries, Kenya has Vision 2030, Uganda has Vision 2040, Rwanda has Vision 2030, or 2020 actually. Is there an alignment in this conversation that, never mind the goodwill, as you mentioned, the coalition of the willing, there is still some teething issues around alignment of these visions so that we have one regional vision that drives interests of all the countries involved? Because the politics is always taking the lead in this conversation.
You see, while, and again I go back to that statement, which is a very powerful statement as far as I'm concerned, about nationalism vis-a-vis regionalism or continentalism or whatever you want to call it. If you look at what is in Kenya's Vision 2030 and look at what is in Uganda's Vision 2040, Rwanda's 2020, you can single out 5 items that are the same, configured in different ways, maybe in different words, maybe in different configurations, maybe in a different order this way or that way. But if you look at them, what is it about? It's about industrialization. That's where you create the jobs. It's about trade. It's about infrastructure. It's about electricity generation. So when we sit down as policymakers, irrespective of what policy initiatives and irrespective of which vision you're pursuing, the items and the programs and the focus is almost the same. But with EAC, it has given us a better avenue to harmonize those issues. With now CFTA and AFTA, we have a forum where we can even consolidate our thoughts and ideas better. And that is why Kenya is among the first countries to sign and ratify both the Continental Free Trade Area and to sign and ratify the tripartite free trade area. In fact, we are one of the 3 countries, and I'm happy to say Uganda is one of the 3, that has signed the tripartite free trade area. We are one of the 6 that have again signed the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. And that demonstrates our focus and commitment that while we have a Vision 2030 in Kenya, it will not go very far if we don't consolidate it with EAC, with TFTA, and with the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. Our focus is very clear. And this is a niche where Kenya and Uganda can actually provide strategic leadership. The business people sitting here today and the policymakers that we are sitting here today, we have the single opportunity because of the greater understanding in EAC led by Kenya and Uganda of the importance of, and we have seen the fruits of actually consolidating our trade issues. We have moved our own intra-trade from 12 to 18% in 10 years. So we have evidence that working together actually brings benefits to everybody. We have that evidence. And that is why it is not strange that both Kenya and Uganda are leading in the TFTA and in the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, because we have already tested the benefits of intra-trade. And this is a niche which I want to challenge the business people here and ask the policymakers that we have a strategic leadership opportunity. We have a strategic leadership opportunity to provide leadership for TFTA and for the Africa Continental Trade Area and draw benefits to our countries in those initiatives. And your point is spot on, that while we have national visions, we have seen here that we have increased trade. As I said, in 10 years, we have doubled trade between our two countries because of opening space for intra-trade, because of the customs union that we have adopted. If we can progress that to the next level, we will see even bigger benefits. The question you ask yourself, as we sit here as East Africans and as signatories to the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, how come the European Union have put together 27 countries, 500 million people, and they negotiate as one? Why are we finding it difficult? Yet they have bigger stakes. They have a bigger economy. We are better off sharing wealth that we create together than protecting poverty that we have in our countries. That's what it amounts to. You know, what are we protecting? We're protecting nothing. So we need to work together to create, and we have seen that by working together, we create more. We need to work together to create more so that we can share, rather than working overtime to protect nothing.
Your Excellency, the conversation around young people, and yesterday you spoke to our young people. We were recognizing for different innovations and entrepreneurship in the various fields. Youth and employment is a big challenge in our region, in both countries. And it's now both, of course, a social issue and a security issue for the two countries. How would you speak to addressing this unemployment problem for our young people?
You see, the way I see it is that we must look at unemployment first. The young people of our country, the young people of our region and our continent is an imperative that is here with us, and we must figure out how to go about it. It's either going to be a blessing, depending on how we deal with it, or it's going to be a big challenge. And I look at it in two ways. Number one, how do we harness this useful or demographic dividend? First, we must equip these young people with the necessary knowledge and give them the correct training and relevant. I say relevant, underlined, relevant, you know? And I will give you context. When I was Minister for Higher Education, we did an audit of skills. What are the gaps? And the discovery was we are training so many managers and we have nobody to work. We have so many students in university. We do not have students who have the middle-level colleges. They are not there. We do not have the right people to work. And then I asked the question, we have classrooms full of people learning, and I have no quarrel with anthropology and the other stories. And you know, I once said, and I was bashed for it, I mean, it's good for us to know, okay, Vasco da Gama was around, he came to the African coast, he arrived there someday, and then he died. Okay, that's fine. But honestly, I mean, how is that of relevance now to industrialization? You know, how and that is why, when I was Minister for Higher Education, we rolled out a huge program. And I'm happy that today, President Uhuru and I, we have rolled out a huge program targeting science and technology, innovation, technical training. And now we are shifting, and our target now is to ensure that we equip many young people with skills and competences that makes them relevant in the drive towards innovation, industrialization, value addition, manufacturing. That is the place where we need to drive, right? And so the youth dividend, you can look at it in two ways. First, we must equip them with knowledge, competencies, skills that makes them employable and relevant in the drive for where we want to take our country and continent. And number two, we must provide the framework. We must provide the infrastructure, rail, road, energy, for the private sector to drive value addition, agro-processing, manufacturing, where the jobs will be created. And with the youth empowered with relevant skills, then a combination of the two will make our young people an asset for our countries and continent. That's how I look at it. And therefore, as we push on one end, the standard gauge railway, the roads we are building, the energy generation we are engaged in, the removal of barriers, non-tariff barriers, elimination of all the other issues that impede trade, investment, we on the other side must be engaged in getting our young people relevant knowledge and competencies so that a combination of the two will then produce wealth. These are people who can then have the relevant skills to work. And so it depends on us. And I am happy that we are all now driving in the same direction. And with the tripartite agreement and all the other agreements that we are signing into, we are all consolidating our actions into a direction that will eventually become mutually beneficial for all of us. And I want to caution us here that the world is changing. And what we used to take for granted in WTO and protection that comes from signing the regional CPAs and is no longer a guarantee. And that is why it is important for us to have this conversation as Kenya and Uganda, as EAC, as the TFTA, and as the CFTA. It is important because that is how we are going to have the muscle, first, to trade with ourselves. Even if we do not succeed to trade with anybody else, if ever we manage to take Africa's intra-trade to 60%, this country, this continent, will be up in the skies.
All right. I need to open this up, Your Excellency, because if I don't, I have a couple of people who will stone me on this other end. I'm hoping a microphone is available. I wanted to begin with Rosa Malango. Rosa Malango, Your Excellency, is the UN resident coordinator here in Uganda. Rosa, I am mindful of the time, so please keep it short. And yes.
First of all, I have to say a word of congratulations and a word of thanks. Your Excellency, you started off by recognizing that yesterday we lost an incredible figure, Kofi Annan, the only second African to serve as UN Secretary General and the first Secretary General to actually rise to the ranks. And as we're here talking about intergenerational dialogue, it brings a sense of urgency to our lives. So thank you for that. I wanted to seek your views on something that you touched upon. Yesterday, we watched a snapshot of the young innovators who had solutions to current problems. And I was sitting there watching them. I started thinking about what is the level of awareness of the frameworks, the protocols, the capital that exists to scale them up. What is the level of ease if really these people want to capture markets, so they're Ugandans? Can they expand this into Rwanda, Burundi, and Kenya? And you've touched upon it a little bit. So what is your word of advice on how can we really make it possible for these innovators that already exist to scale up in the East African region and by doing so successfully become an example for the continent? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Your Excellency.
Thank you very much. I was pleasantly surprised last night, and you're spot on. Those young people were incredible. For a moment, I thought I was in Kenya. Those young people were incredible, I must say that. And it actually made me confirm that what is going on in Kenya is going on in Uganda, and that progressively we are becoming one society. And I agree with you that the young people are almost ahead of us in terms of what they are doing. They are actually, we're not actually pushing them, they are pulling us in the march into innovation, creativity, and that space. So the more we see, the more we believe. Yeah, and the encouragement I would give is there is scope, there is opportunity, and with the advent of the internet and all the space that has been created by all the agreements that we have in place, there is scope for opportunity to be scaled up. And the young people that I saw last night, the young people that I see in Kenya, and I was happy that there was actually a blend of some young people from Kenya who are actually here. That people-to-people and business-to-business interaction is what will provide opportunity for that scale-up. And at the policy level, we have made a conscious decision that business people around our EAC, if there are still areas where there are impediments, that's why we provided the forum for them to engage policymakers, that we still find barriers here, we still find roadblocks here. And an announcement like that, the one that was made last night, partnership between a Kenyan firm and JAGMA and people in that space, where we provide incentives for young people to scale up their applications, their innovations, is a case in point. And those opportunities are available, and it's for the young people who I saw last night, and I hope they're listening to us, for them to take up those opportunities and work with industry and work with other players so that they can scale up their activities.
Thank you, Your Excellency. I must mention they're also watching. We're streaming this live on Facebook, on several platforms, and this is also live on TV. But also we are using the hashtag AfricaNow and Ruto in UG, the shortest hashtag ever. It's very nice. Allow me ask the former Speaker of the East African Legislative Assembly, Dan Kidega, to say one or two things. Please keep it short. Rosa set a precedent. Let's stick to it.
Thank you so much. Your Excellency, allow me to congratulate you for the highest award that you received last evening. You deserve it. Congratulations, sir.
Thank you, my friend.
A lot has been achieved. Trade volumes have gone up. There's a lot of harmony. But I think it is time to consolidate the gains. And I'm trying to speak to the question of governance, which actually slows down implementation. I think we need to keep our eyes to the dream or the vision of our forefathers. A united Africa, a unitary government for African Union. The strategy we are taking here is to use the regional blocks as the building block for the African unity and eventual common government. But when we draw it down to what is happening at the regional blocks on the continent, I think we are missing a point on the ball that was raised by our founding fathers, the question of governance and political unity. I believe that for us to consolidate the gain that has been made in East African community, we need to start the conversation on political federation. If we leave this debate out of this whole realm of discussions, because as the traders move, they want a unitary governance system. They want a system that does not scatter them all over. The custom union is in place. The East African Monetary Union is in place. But the speed of implementation is too low, Your Excellency. The East African community still suffer chronic funding problems. With its budget 50% funded by donors, squatting into the policy space that we are trying to protect jealously. So I think we should consolidate the governance aspect and start conversation on politics. And sir, would you wish to see a political federation in East Africa in your time? Thank you.
The final question was very direct. I see where you're going. Your Excellency.
Mr. Speaker, sir. I am a great believer that, not just in my lifetime, I wish we had gotten there by now. I am a very strong believer that the way to fuel and expedite all these consolidation efforts is to actually have a political federation. I am very clear in my mind, and you know, President Museveni is our father in the region. He's the old man with a cape is our father in the region. And he does many things. And sometimes I don't agree with him in some things. But President Museveni is very clear on matters East Africa. And that is why I am a great supporter of President Museveni. He believes in us, much as he's the president of Uganda, but his heart is in the region. And his strategic leadership in putting the various countries together and his experience is invaluable. It is something that this moment in our EAC.
Apologies, sir.
Sorry. I was saying that his leadership in providing the opportunity we have to harness his wisdom and leadership for consolidating EAC and TFTA and CFTA is one thing that we will be poorer if we don't have. And we, as the younger leaders in this region, hope that President Museveni, President Uhuru Kenyatta, and the other regional leaders can provide us with that opportunity to have a political federation so that we can make quicker progress in consolidating everything we are saying here, whether it is trade, whether investment in trans-regional infrastructure, investment in our young people, and creating the necessary intra-Africa trade. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to tell you that as Kenya, as a people, we are great believers in the political federation of East Africa. And we hope that Uganda will help us achieve that political federation sooner than what you have proposed. And I am confident that under the leadership of President Museveni, we will get there.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. I'll ask an entrepreneur, Your Excellency, to say something. Someone from the private sector, Maria Dido. She's an entrepreneur. She's been big on. Please come. I will give you my microphone. Just we apologize. These microphones are off, and we're trying to find out how we can power them back. Microphone to Maria, please.
Thank you very much. Welcome, Deputy President. Let me start by, as private sector, congratulate you and the leaders in East Africa for what you've done to enhance business in East Africa. Having said that, let me ask for more. Mr. Vice President, Mr. Deputy President, in Kenya, you have, within the financial sector, you have a capped interest rate in the banks. I think it was a very innovative idea. I don't know how it has worked to enhance business, and whether it is something that within the East African vision can be shared with other East African countries. We have KCB in the East African region. We now have Equity Bank in the East African region. However, they operate within the country's financial obligations rather than the East African vision. To be able to develop SMEs within the region and even the mainstream businesses, it is important that we keep most of our capital within the region. And to do that, if we could share advantageous financial policies so that our region can use that money to invest back into this region. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Maria. On the issue of the interest rates, our thoughts, we tried. In fact, personally, I had a discussion with the Bankers Association. And we tried to have a conversation with them that what kind of business will you do where you borrow money at 25%? What profits will you be making to be able to pay back that money? I mean, it's just a straightforward conversation. Unless you sell drugs or something, with supernatural profits. And when we tried to have this conversation, it was a convoluted conversation. We have risks. It was just a big conversation. And it became a huge frustration And policymakers decided to go for this interest rate cap, which is not progressive, we are told. It is backward looking. We were told it is not what progressive policy, initiatives are all about. But it was an exercise in frustration because people could not get the banks to understand that it is better to lend more and get a smaller interest rate than lend to more people, at a lower interest rate than lend to a few people at a high interest rate. But with that frustration, it became a big political debate in Kenya. And as a government, we were torn between the financial institutions and what they were telling us, and the public that was saying we can't afford these high interest rates of 20-25%. So finally, we erred on the side of the people. And the president signed into law the interest rate caps. And then we ran into problems with the financial institutions. And we ran into a bit of turbulence with the IMF and the others. They told us this is not right. So we've been having that conversation. But you see, it's an irony because day before yesterday, the banks were declaring their profits. And they were usual, the high I don't know, that bank 18 billion shillings, another bank there 12 billion shillings profit, half year profit. And here they are telling us that because of interest rate caps, they are not making money. So it is just I don't know what to say. We are in a conundrum there. So while we cannot export it to Uganda because we still have issues with it, but we hope that with the passage of time, although we are under pressure from our development partners to remove the interest rate caps, but the point that you have made is solid. How do we finance our medium and micro enterprises? How do we finance? Because those are the job creators. If they have no access to credit, they cannot grow. And some of the interventions we are trying to make as a government is we are consolidating around 5 financial institutions owned by government into one. We're trying to see whether we can consolidate some financial institutions that will lend directly to the SMEs. Do you, Aden, want to speak to this? Maybe for a minute, you can help me. You are the person driving. Give him the microphone. You can help me on.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. I think I should disclose my interest. I was one of the bankers who were giving the stories of high risk many years back, and now having changed my position, I think we must have controlled interest rates. No, I'm just joking. But as His Excellency mentioned, I think it was the matter of dealing with 2 difficult and painful decisions. One is making sure that businesses can afford funds that can enable them to drive the economic growth. That took a long time, and it was almost becoming like a mirage that we cannot get people to lend money at reasonable rates. The alternative is to do what happened in terms of setting up the controls, a very popular mechanism amongst the citizens, amongst customers of banks. Then we realized banks slowed down some of that lending. And I think the avenue that they have found is lending to governments. And that is an opportunity that they have found, a window of borrowing by governments that ended up actually isolating the customers that we had intended to be supported in the first place. So one big trick, I think, across the continent that we need to figure out is if government is also a borrower, we need to figure out how that is going to compete with the private sector, which this was originally intended to benefit going forward. But I think if you look back many years ago and looking to where we are today and what the future looks like, competition is good. We need to make sure that, you know, the things that have been described as risk factors continues to get mitigated. And that talks to issues around reducing the cost of doing business, making sure that the securities that banks take, the judicial systems that deal with issues of recoveries of some of those debts when they become non-performing, all gets improved and become much more efficient, because over time, I think competition will make things work and it will drive the inefficient banks out of business. But somehow now we have been unable to see who is efficient and who is not. It looks like it's a club that is colluding, but it's a constant challenge that we need to deal with. Because for a bank to lend at 1%, 2%, 3% in Europe to customers, and by the way, European customers find that very expensive, funny enough. And here we are lending at 25% to 30%, depending on which country you are in. There is something fundamentally wrong, and that is something that I think a joint program between policymakers and private sector, both bankers but also customers, need to work together going forward.
Can you speak to the issue of Biashara Bank and all that consolidation?
Yeah. Now, there is, of course, a role for government to bridge the gaps where private sector financial institutions have not been able to succeed in doing that. And so in Kenya, the government put up some funds for supporting the small and medium-sized businesses. Whilst that has got its own challenges, because a lot of people think government money and borrowings are things like a gift, but continuous improvement. Sounds like even in Uganda is the same. I think the governance process around that can get, can be improved. What we have as government is in Kenya to consolidate a number of funds, a number of financial institutions that are targeting small and medium-sized businesses to come under one umbrella, where government can put in some funds, seed capital, we can get some other, private capital that comes into this to see how we can really fill this gap that the commercial banks have struggled for a very long time, because SMEs will be a problem for the financial institutions, but we can't let them suffer, because they are one of the biggest job creators in any economy on the continent. And in Africa, for every 10 jobs that are created, I think anywhere between 7 to 9, depending on which country you are, jobs are created by SMEs. So the government has a role, and that is why Kenya government has taken a very proactive role, notwithstanding some of the mindsets that people have, to merge over 5 different institutions dealing with supporting financially small businesses into one umbrella. That is now actually a process that we are going through Parliament to make sure that we can get.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Honorable. I honestly have asked, and I've asked for permission because I was told to close this because His Excellency has another engagement. I have a young person, Your Excellency, and I thought, I'm not saying anything about the people who've spoken before. They're also young in a way. I want to ask H.E Waswa. H.E has been fortunate to work both in Rwanda and Uganda, and so he'll probably understand a little more about regional integration. H.E, H.E, please stand. We need to find. Don't be deceived by his gray hair. He's actually very young. The microphone is coming to you, H.E. Unfortunately, we can't take any more questions. His Excellency has another engagement. And he says he would really have loved to take as many questions as possible. Yes.
I don't know about young, but I'll take it. Your Excellency, it's a great honor to interact. You've said a lot of things, and you've made a great case about unlocking the economic potential of East Africa. On one hand, you've spoken about the opportunities that come with expanded markets and trade. On the policy level, you've also spoken about interventions that your government and East African governments in many ways have implemented to unblock, to address the constraints, binding constraints to trade and economic growth, infrastructure, energy investments, retooling young people. I guess my question is, given the scale of the problem, and really the scale of the problem is within trying to understand jobs as a challenge. I'll speak very quickly on Uganda. Uganda has a working population of 15 million people. 14 million of those are in agriculture. 1 million are in both the formal sector and the informal sector of farm jobs. It graduates 300,000 young people every year in an economy that creates about 10,000 to 13,000 jobs every year. That's the scale of the problem. I don't know how many young people graduate in Kenya every year, but I've seen a figure somewhere of about 50,000 jobs created every year. So the scale of the problem is really huge. So my question is twofold. One, what do you see as the opportunity? What do we have to do to have a sustained, consistent strategy around addressing, doing the things you've just outlined on trade, on addressing binding constraints to trade over a 15, 20-year period? Because as you know, other countries, East Asia, China, managed this process because they were consistent and sustained that. So what is the one or two things that have to be done to have that consistency over a long period of time? And in 10 years, where do you think we will be? Would we be generating 150,000, 200,000 jobs in each of our economies? Can we get there? Thank you.
Thank you very much, my brother, for giving us the picture of the magnitude of the challenge. But if you look at it from the other side being, what are the opportunity costs if we don't do what we must do? As we talk today, the biggest, this country exports more to India, or imports more from India, China, UAE, and one more country, and then Kenya, right? If you take what this country imports from those countries outside EAC and outside Africa, it goes all the way to more than 50%. If we turn around that and we import that from within EAC and Africa, it reduces the magnitude of that problem by a huge percentage. So the challenge is in understanding the magnitude of the problem and juxtaposing it with the enormity of the opportunity that we have if we do the right thing. And I like what you have said, that we must be consistent. Why we have succeeded and driven intra-regional trade in EAC from 10 to 18% is almost 20 years of consistent EAC from 1999, of consistent EAC working together, right? So what is the future in the way where I sit, as you have asked me, where do I see the future? You know, it took longer for us to agree It has taken us almost 20 years of ESC. I see CFTA taking us a shorter time. Why do I say so? The tripartite agreement, which we signed earlier, has 3 countries which has ratified. The continental free trade area has already 6 countries signed and ratified, which tells you there is a greater understanding today of the importance of a single market for the continent. And that single market for the continent will do several things for us. Number one, it will give the business people in our continent the opportunity to produce not for competing markets outside our continent, but for this continent. And with that expanded market, it then gives us the opportunity to enhance the 10,000 jobs that are being created in the economy in Uganda to 50,000. That possibility now exists if our focus is on markets that are not competing like the markets we are struggling, all of us, to find in Europe and Asia and elsewhere. If we can then provide the infrastructure, and that is why this discussion about the railway, the roads, the connecting infrastructure in ESC and the region is important. Once those building blocks are in place, and if we can harness the goodwill, and I am very optimistic as a policymaker that we have tremendous goodwill at the moment from the regional leaders and from the continental leaders to facilitate and conclude the continental free trade area. If we can push and be consistent about that push, we will definitely turn the tables on the numbers of jobs that we can be able to create in ESC and in our continent. So the horizon to me, from where I sit, looks very promising. And when I sit here and listen to business people in Uganda speak the same language as business people in Kenya, I'm encouraged as a policymaker that in fact the magnitude of the problem will be substantially reduced by harnessing the opportunity that collectively we are working on. That is my take. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency.
I would have really loved to answer a few more questions. I promise to make myself available at
How well you have had.
another opportunity, so that, because this conversation is important. This conversation is very important. In fact, it is more important than any other conversation that we are going to have. Because this is about our future, this is about solving our challenges, and this is about building the bridges that will help all of us grow and create wealth and create jobs and create hope for our continent. And good people, I want to encourage you to keep at it. Sometimes you'll be discouraged by what politicians do. Sometimes we may make the wrong decisions, but you cannot lose hope. You cannot give up on your continent. This is our continent. Whatever it takes, we must pull up our socks, we must tighten up our belts, and we must do what it takes to move this continent forward. Thank you very much.
Asante sana, Your Excellency. A round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, for His Excellency, the Deputy President. Please do take your seat, Your Excellency. We have one more activity. Well.
Yeah, thank you, Your Excellency. Can we have the national anthems, please? Great thanks to NTV for the live coverage of this conversation, and for NBS for the live coverage as well, and all the online support. Thank you so much.